Okay. All right. So good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our webinar today, From Startup to Supersize, Navigating Franchise Growth. My name is Aubrey Codier, and I am part of the development team here at Zoracle, and I will be your co-host for the day. Today, Rebecca Monet, our 22-year franchise veteran, chief scientist, and president of Zoracle Profiles, will be teaching us about stages of growth in a franchise system. We will have a Q&A session set up at the end, so if you could just go ahead and enter any questions you have throughout the session, and we'll get to those at the end of the conversation. I'd also encourage you guys to have a piece of paper and a pen ready because we're going to be covering a lot of information. So take notes. This will be useful for you throughout forever. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Miss Rebecca Monet.
Thanks, Aubrey. Thanks, Aubrey. So the year was 1980. I was young and without gray hair, sitting third row back in an economics class. The first time I heard the words stages of growth. I would go on to become an expert in neurology and performance psychology as it related to business ownership. The stages of growth would remain an important element in my work. Today, I'd like to share with you the 5 predictable stages of growth every franchise system goes through in hopes that it will edify and enlighten you so you might mitigate the crises and exploit your growth opportunities within each stage. In front of you, what you're going to see is some work of Neil Churchill and his counterpart, Virginia Lewis. This was work that was first published in the Harvard Business Review, and it outlines the stages of growth of an organization and the crises each can expect to encounter as they move from one stage of growth to another. You'll find Churchill's stages of growth work being used at all management consulting firms, including McKinsey & Company, Deloitte Consulting, Ernst & Young, PricewaterhouseCoopers. At Zoracle, we use the stages of growth model to assist franchise companies to recruit, select, train, and support what we call A players, or franchisees that are compatible and performing well within your franchise organization. So due to competition and technological advances, availability of resources, and other market-related changes, the climate of business, as you know, can be as variable as weather. So as your company evolves and grows, it will require different business practices and skill sets for a franchisee to be successful. In looking at this graphic, you'll notice it means the means of growth are a matter of going through certain crises and also looking at those crises and how to mitigate them or prevent them. So there are also 5 additional factors that we want to look at, including management style, organizational structure, extent of formal systems, what your major focus or your strategy is that you're using to grow your system, and how involved the concept originator remains. So there are basically 7 big pieces of this. What are the stages of growth and what are the crises that we're going to go through? And what is the overall structure and management style of an organization? So at all times, I want you to keep in mind that your stage of a growth requires the proper selection of franchisee that fits well within that particular stage of growth, and it needs to also be someone that can evolve and grow with you into that next phase. So let's just jump right into the stages of growth. The first stage is what we call at Zoracle the entrepreneurial phase, or the entrepreneurial stage. So this is a franchise organization that's a true startup. The concept originator comes up with a really cool idea, a new widget, a new way to go to market, a new service. And the concept originator is working busily on continue to keep this product best of best and top of mind. So the focus of the concept originator is not only on remaining creative and having this product or service be the best and unique, but he's also at the same time managing a handful of employees, all highly skilled, all overworked, all wearing a gazillion different hats throughout the day. But again, the focus in this early stage franchise organization is to leverage, position, and fine-tune whatever this product or service is that the concept originator has come up with. So the system is a very dynamic system. There aren't a whole lot of processes in place at this point, but there is a really cool idea or a cool product or service. So let's look a little bit at the benefits to the franchisees. To a franchisee, this new concept, this better widget, is oftentimes first to market. So this allows a franchisee to be able to exploit on that whole idea. Additionally, a franchisee is able to negotiate better terms. And franchisors that are in this stage one, you can relate to this or you've moved out of it. A franchisee frequently in this stage one will negotiate better terms, everything from larger territories to forgiveness on royalties to a better price coming in. But they're definitely negotiating deals that are good for them. One of the other benefits of a franchisee in a stage one is that there are fewer rules. There's not a whole lot of systems. It's still a very dynamic, and the rules aren't buttoned down just yet. So a franchisee that enjoys a business that doesn't have a whole lot of rules yet does really well in a stage one. Also, the franchisee that enjoys having a say in policy will enjoy a stage one. And of course, the benefits financially to a stage one franchisee are huge, oftentimes simply because they've negotiated some pretty cool contracts with the franchisor. But let's look at some of the challenges. Some of the challenges for the franchisor and the franchisee is, of course, that there are limited resources, both human and financial, and you name it. So we're understaffed, many people doing many different things. And the concept originator wearing a gazillion hats, as well as the employees wearing a gazillion hats. So there's oftentimes a distraction by the concept originator, who is also the leader, who also has a buck stops here kind of mentality. So we're low on resources. Leadership is a little distracted because they're doing so many different things. And support and training is oftentimes short in this early stage, stage one, entrepreneurial franchise system. So the systems are dynamic, oftentimes causing chaos because we're changing them as we move on, allowing for a lot of error in that process. But the bigger challenge to me is these very liberal contracts that a franchisor will negotiate in an effort to bring on these early stage franchisees. So let's look again, kind of overview what a stage one franchisor, or what we call an entrepreneurial franchisor, is. From a structure perspective, they are using a management style that is direct supervision. So concept originator makes all the decision and has a handful of employees reporting directly to him or her. The extent of the formal systems, which is one of the ways we know what stage of growth our franchisors are in, are minimal. In fact, in some cases, almost non-existent, and for sure, always dynamic. The major strategy a stage one franchisor will be using is to create the best possible product or service. So the focus is on just that. Additionally, we can tell what stage of growth someone is in, or what the company is in, based on where that concept originator is spending his time and his focus. How much of his time and energy is in the business versus outside of the business. So we can see from the dots down below the amount of focus on the concept originator versus the business itself. So now let's look at Neil Churchill's work on growth and on the potential crises that can come up. So in stage one, usually a younger a smaller organization, although I have to tell you, having done this now for 22 years, I've seen franchise organizations that are 20 years old and still in stage one. So it's more about the structure of the organization, the culture of the organization, how involved the concept originator is. But if we were to grow through stage one and into stage two, the way that we grow is by being creative. It really is about the product. It really is about the service. The challenge that stage one franchisors oftentimes experience is in that of leadership. We got this concept originator doing 10 million things and oftentimes may be endlessly creative, but not a natural leader. Or even if he or she is a natural leader, is so distracted with so many things on his plate. So the crises will come and the slowing down of growth will happen simply because there is no true leader. So that will prevent the ongoing growth into stage two. But let's assume for a second that the franchisor has the leadership skills or realizes that maybe he does not or she does not. So what they oftentimes do is they then will reach out to someone who does, either an operational individual, but they basically make their first sort of big hire. And it becomes a sort of a divide and conquer that begins to happen in stage two, where one will lead and set the vision and create the structure, and another will begin to implement best practices. And the way they get those best practices, obviously, is by emulating other franchise organizations and or going out to their current franchisees, the ones that were willing to take the risk, that had broad spectrum core competencies, and stepped out even without a whole lot of systems or validation in place. They're going to reach out to those early stage franchisees and elicit what those best practices are. Then they'll begin to memorialize them and roll them out to that next wave of franchisees that come in. So stage two, the way we know we've moved into stage two, is we've brought in or we've empowered someone that is likely an operational person that begins to put legs under what this earlier system was. So the systems begin to take form. Our product offering becomes clear. In fact, oftentimes in stage two, I see the product offering changing. Early products and things we put out, we discover are not as profitable. So we change up the mix of them, and we now have greater clarity as to what the end user, the consumer, is actually wanting. So there's a market penetration strategy in place because we have a better idea of our products and services, so we now have a better idea who our end user is. The whole focus in stage two, or what we call a partnership franchisor, is on systems. The reason we call it a partnership is because there's both a partnership between the concept originator and this operational team where they're working synergistically, but there's also a true interdependent partnership between the franchisee and the franchisor. We're getting clearer on what we are to do as franchisor and what we expect and or need out of our franchisees. So obviously there's some great benefits to our franchisee in stage two, in that there's some market awareness. We already have some locations or some presence in the marketplace, and we're beginning to notice what we need in terms of complementary skill sets, what we need to bring to the table versus what the franchisee needs to bring into the table to work and grow market share together. We have some best practices, and we've memorialized them in such a way that the next wave of franchisees likely is going to ramp up more quickly and be able to grow market share in a more effortless way. However, and those of you that have been through stage two have probably recognized this, as we go through stage two, one of the things we begin to notice is those early franchisees, those wild, wild west, true entrepreneurs that we brought in that had broad spectrum skill sets, had a willingness to take a risk, that we gave a lot of latitude to. They're used to working autonomously. Now, as we move into stage 2 and we're pushing out more and more systems and processes, those early stage franchisees are starting to squeal or whine or are unhappy. Not everyone is capable of moving into stage 2. So some of those franchisees may be exiting now or not validating well, thus offering some pruning opportunities for the franchisor and, of course, the second wave of franchisees where they can go into marketplaces that have already had some presence with that product or that service or that brand. So naturally, there are some challenges, as I mentioned before, including this resistance to change that franchisees seem to go through in stage 2. So they like their autonomy. They like doing things their own way. And at one point, we allowed it when we were in stage 1. We begin to notice some reporting issues, some royalty issues. This may be when we bring in the marketing expenses, and even though they were originally in our contracts, it's now that we're starting to exert it and ask our franchisees to pay them. We're asking for more reporting from the franchisees. Franchisees not always excited about having to do that kind of reporting. There's some validation issues, and of course the biggest issues is this franchisee that was used to working autonomously. One of the other things that starts to happen in stage 2 is we came up with this really great idea, we launched a franchise, we went through stage 1, we're now in stage 2, and all of a sudden the world says, that's a really cool idea, I think I'll do it also. So we begin to have some competition, which we didn't have typically in stage 1. So these are all some challenges that the franchisor will begin to deal with. So in stage 2, the growth will come through an actual strategic plan, so some form of direction, and that comes simply because the concept originator is able to step back a little bit and look at the big picture versus just what that product and service. There's a little bit of breather at this point, and he now has someone that he trusts that is putting in some of the training, the support, the operational procedures, etc. So it comes through direction, and that is not only inside, but it's also directing out towards the franchisee, where we can now give them greater direction, a greater idea of how they might grow their business. But the crises will come through this endless need for autonomy that franchisees, especially early stage franchisees, seem to want. We need to bring them under the fold, but many will wish to remain autonomous. Franchisors oftentimes at this particular place will ignore this piece and allow franchisees to continue to operate in any way they wish, in an autonomous way, and this ultimately will be the reason we don't grow to stage 3. So this has to be curtailed in some way. So if we look at the overall characteristics of a stage 2 franchise system, the structure of the system is now a supervised supervision model. So it's not everybody reporting to the concept originator any longer. There's, a couple of VPs, maybe one of ops and maybe one of training and support, and then there are individuals underneath that are beginning to support that. So it's supervised supervision, and our systems are basic, but they are working and they are helping our next level of franchisees to come in. So the strategy is always on building systems in stage 2 and making sure they're working. Now we notice that the owner is still heavily involved, the concept originator in this, almost 50-50 or as we see with the business itself. So there's still heavy involvement, but we're specializing at this point. So as the franchise system continues to grow, if we've put in solid systems, we've dealt with the validation issues, we've dealt with some of the retention issues, and we are now going to the next wave of franchisees. We'll grow into stage 3, what we call a true plug-and-play franchisee. Here our systems are replicable. We have a very clear value proposition, which naturally, like all businesses, has evolved and has shifted to some degree. We have a very strong recruitment process, training process, support strategy in place to help that next wave of franchisees succeed. We're adding services and solutions. So what will distinguish a stage 3 franchisor is the focus has shifted from product to creating systems to now the systems are working, and now let's focus on how do we empower the franchisee? How do we help him become stronger in his marketplace, more profitable? So as a franchisor, we begin to pour out additional services and solutions, call centers, regional or local marketing, a better POS system, having some vendor relationships that we can then pass on to our franchisee to have them save some money on those products or services. However, at stage 3, our market is not overly saturated. We may not have massive regional development opportunities, at least not domestically available, but what we do have is some single unit, multi-unit opportunities that are still available for that franchisor. We begin to see again a pruning going on. Early stage franchisees either coming up on their 10-year contract or not happy because, again, more systems are being put in place. Usually in stage 3, we have on staff a team of lawyers and paralegals that are making sure that franchisees are complying in a way that we can guard the brand equity. And these things are, of course, important to do, but we have early stage franchisees, again, that aren't comfortable with that level of accountability and or compliance. However, faster ramp-up time here, right? And the other couple of benefits that we see is the franchisors beginning to implement advisory panels, advisory committees, oftentimes run by some of the best franchisees in the organization. And of course, in stage 3, we have the leverageability of resources, especially some vendor relationships that a franchisor in stage 3 or the plug-and-play organization has that can roll out to the franchisee. Some of the challenges that we see with a stage 3 franchisor is some retention problem, some validation issues for all the same reasons as we saw in 2, but multiplied times 10, simply because, again, we are now a plug-and-play. So we start to notice some compliance issues happening here and litigation taking place. Our job as franchisors is to guard our brand equity, our systems, and so we do begin to see some litigation in stage 3. We also begin to see some increased costs due to the extra services that we're providing to the franchisee, extra training, field support individual, additional marketing services, but the costs begin to go up. So, you know, it's interesting as I look at this slide, it reminds me a little bit of a client that we worked with some time back who was having some validation issues. They were actually a 2.7 franchisor, and they were having some validation issues. And anyone who's in franchise development knows that's a kiss of death, right? So we want to get ahead of that before those issues begin to happen. But some is just going to happen because we've evolved, and they just don't like what we're evolving to. So this franchisor was having some validation issues, and when we did a top performer model on them, we could see from various markers which franchisees would begin to have a level of uncomfortableness that either their performance would begin to drop or their validation and satisfaction would begin to drop. And as you know, those things tend to go hand in hand. So being able to provide that information, that particular franchisor was able to go to those franchisees, and most of them were early stage franchisees, and negotiate in a way that they were able to buy back territory before the performance started to drop, before the validation started to drop, and obviously protecting their item 19, which is so important. So stage of growth 3, or what we call the plug and play, the way we grow through that and move then into stage 4 is through delegation, where literally we have a VP of marketing, a VP of IT, a VP of research and development, and each are an expert, and we empower and we delegate to them. So the concept originator is beginning to step back and trust that he or she has selected wise individuals to take him or her to that next level. But it's also a delegation outside of the corporation. In other words, we are delegating to the franchisee what they are to do in their local marketplace. Our job is not to do their job. Our job is to empower them so they can do their job. So here we have all these systems going in place, a greater centralization, a buttoning down of systems due to recommendations from other ZORs who've been through here, and of course our lawyers who are suggesting such. However, the crisis is in the control of it. So we're wanting to control the quality. We're wanting to control the imaging and the perception. We're wanting to control the deliverable and the service that the franchisee is providing. And so we're exerting a certain level of control. And it's the control alone that causes the crises or the lack of control in some cases. So the stage 3 franchisor is a management style that is functional. It is a management style, as you can begin to see in terms of the organizational, where we have silos of expertise, a marketer with a team of marketers underneath her that support it. So it isn't someone doing 3 jobs, it's someone focused on a particular level of expertise. The systems are buttoned down. They're truly plug and play and systematic. Now, a franchisor at this place will do one of 2 things, and see if you can think of any franchise companies that you know that have done that. One franchisor will choose to hover. He or she will choose to stay in stage 3, which is a profitable place, and maintain this status quo, continuing to support and nurture and encourage the franchisee and sort of hover in a way. Other franchisors will do something else. They'll get to a place where they go, no, we want to dominate the marketplace. So they will go out and gather resources, oftentimes going public or bringing in large investors, to have them grow to the next level, where they go from 300 to 1,500 units over a period of time, or whatever that number might be. So some franchisors in stage 3 will choose to hover. Some will choose to go out, get financial resources, and grow. If they choose to grow, they will move into a stage 4, where the focus in stage 4 is on market dominance. That is the goal, to dominate the marketplace. What distinguishes a stage 4 franchise organization is in how they choose to grow market share. Stage 1, stage 2, and even into stage 3, it's through organic growth, single unit, multi-unit, regional developers. By the time we move into stage 4, the way we grow is by buying market share, oftentimes merging and acquiring other businesses. We just watched, just in the last week or 2, this happening with Dwyer Group, a unbelievably excellent franchise organization who decided they were going to grow by buying service brands. Grounds Guys in Canada, Molly Maids, Mr. Handyman, Protect Painters. So merging those businesses together. So naturally, in merging businesses, there are going to be challenges, and we'll talk about that. But the focus of the Empire business is to dominate. At this stage, typically they are so large that they are able to negotiate some exclusive vendor and supplier agreements, which they then can push out to their franchisees. We can see that with the potato contracts that a McDonald's has. So I'm sure you can think of many examples of that. A stage 4 franchisor treats his franchisee different than a stage 1, 2, or 3. The franchisee becomes more of the deliverable, more of a technician, not that hunter that we saw in stage 1, 2, and 3. The systems, of course, are plug and play. We just need the franchisee to follow it, and they will grow, and we will grow as a franchisor. So the benefits to the franchisee is the systems are proven. They're working. Just do it. Plug and play, right? Go ahead. There's lots of brand equity. This is a brand that is seen on every corner, and we have some market dominance. There's strong support, there's strong financials, and if you are a prospective franchisee into a stage 4 and you're already in business, you're already in the, let's say, real estate business, you might be acquired or merged with a larger brand of some sort. We saw that with Century 21 and other large franchise organizations. There's also this leverageability of resources that we see with stage 4 that is a wonderful benefit for our franchisees. However, as I mentioned, a stage 3 who chooses to move to stage 4 frequently are going out to gather resources to grow. So it's not uncommon for a stage 4 company to be a publicly traded company. One of the challenges with a stage 4 is if we're treating our franchisee as a technician and we're pushing more and more services their direction, including local marketing, and you name it, call centers to set up appointments for them, all kinds of support, infield consultants and trainers. The cost to maintain a large organization like this with many, many different silos is quite expensive, as you can imagine. So our franchisors have to keep their eye on that. One of the other issues is the communication. The larger, more bureaucratic an organization, the more challenges we have with communication, both internally from one concept to another, one department to another, but also between franchisee and franchisor. Lots of red tape that we have to get through. The other issue a stage 4 company has is a disconnect from the end user. Literally, we are perpetuating the system, and we have lost touch in some cases, not all cases, but in some cases, with the end user. We can't feel the pulse because there's too many layers between us and who that consumer is and what he or she needs. So our agility begins to go down. And in my opinion, the worst issue with the stage 4, if not paid attention to, is of course the hunter instinct begins to die within the franchisee as the franchisor takes on more and more of the responsibilities that once were the responsibility of the franchisee. So growth, according to Churchill, comes through coordination. Difficult to do, especially if you have 12 brands underneath a massive brands. So growth is in our ability as stage 4 organizations to coordinate, to share resources, but also to coordinate out with our franchisees so we can hear the feedback, so we know what's going on at the franchisee level as well as the consumer level and from department to department. This is a massive concern, and if done well, a stage 4 company will continue to grow market share. If not done well and the red tape gets us hung up, then the stage 4 company will begin to struggle. So some of the characteristics of a stage 4 organization is the management style is a line and staff sort of organization. You can see the many different layers, and if there's several brands under a single brand, then you got each of those line and staff within each of those, and then of course the overlap of those. So extensive formal systems, and the focus, of course, is on dominating the marketplace. You notice the concept originator is beginning to step out, right? And having less to say about what the culture is and where the direction of this company is going, because it is likely a publicly traded company, or at least a strong investor in there. So a stage 4 company will at times move to stage 5. And what causes them frequently to move to stage 5, or what we call a hybrid, is when they begin to see that they've lost some of the agility, or the profits begin to drop, at which point they have a couple of choices, or maybe a half a dozen choices, but there's usually 2 that they pick. So they will typically choose to decentralize or break off pieces of their own business. We saw this in 2005 with Sendent, owning a chain of hotel and travel businesses, a chain of real estate business, a chain of tax and financial services, as well as car businesses, rental car businesses. So in 2005, broke up this massive organization into smaller, more agile, more specific to the consumer organizations in an effort to bring back shareholder value. So this is typical. Another way a stage 5 company can work is it could be a large organization, maybe 1,000 units, doing well, but what they're noticing is they need to diversify simply because they're missing certain market shares that they could get otherwise. So they'll bring in another brand underneath, but it's a separate brand run under a larger brand. So a baby company along with a massive company. We see this with home franchise concepts. Budget Blinds doing great, bringing on a wonderful new concept, tailored living and concrete craft, both concepts that fill in where Budget Blinds alone can't, that will augment or complement. This is what we might call a hybrid. The focus on stage 5 is on renewal, revival, and getting back in touch with the consumer. So the benefits to the franchisee, of course, is we got brand awareness. It's a large brand, but we are now much more intrapreneurial, not entrepreneur like stage 1, but we're acting more like a stage 2 or maybe in a stage 3 company, but we still have this large brand on top of it. So there's well-defined products and services. The systems are more flexible than what we saw in stage 4 or even late stage 3, but they're not as crazy and as wild as what we might have seen in a stage 1. Why? Because that franchisor has done this before and knows how to go about it and can leverage his current systems. So some of the challenges of a stage 5 is there are many systemic changes. And of course, there's costs involved in supporting a system, as well as the marketing cost of now having 2 or 3 or 4 chunks instead of just a single chunk. There are also some compliance and regulation issues. How do we run concept versus a second concept? And most importantly to me is this whole, if we don't make a mental shift from working with our franchisee more as a technician, if we don't shift from there to treating them more like partners or even possibly contractors at worst, then we don't get this hunter instinct back. So stage 5 has growth through collaboration, where We are collaborating with one another corporately within concept to concept, but we're also collaborating and treating our franchisee more as a partner. We saw this in South Africa, and we saw this in Europe with Hewlett-Packard with their printing concept, a true collaboration and allowing them to continue to grow. Now, the crises in stage 5 will depend. It'll depend if we've shifted and we're acting more like stage 2 companies or stage 1 companies or stage 3 companies, then of course it cycles. So our belief at Zorkel is this model that Churchill has laid out for us is a linear model. But we believe, especially in franchising, that it can also be a spiral model, a model where we shift from 5 to 3 or 3 to 2 if we didn't go through those crises. So a spiral model that is more akin to the work that we might have seen through Dr. Claire Graves. So stage 5, let's talk about overview of that. Divisional management. So not this massive structure that we saw in 4. Systems are stable yet flexible, and our whole focus is on renew and reinvent ourselves. So quick review, and then I'm going to turn it back over to you, Miss Aubrey, for any kind of questions that we might have. Stage 1, entrepreneurial, direct supervision, minimal systems. The concept originator is at the helm, buck stops here mentality. We are product focused. We grow through remaining creative, and we run into crises when there is a leadership issue, usually a lack thereof. Stage 2, we're a partnership company. We have a supervised supervision model. We have some basic systems in place. The originator is fully engaged and involved, but delegating, right? We are focused on systems. We're growing because we have a clear strategic plan and direction because we've done a divide and conquer. And if we allow our franchisees to continue to act in autonomous ways, we're going to run into crises and we're not going to grow. Stage 3, plug and play. Systems are buttoned down. Management style is that of a functional management style with replicable systems. The originator of the concept is just beginning to distance himself or herself, having put in place some smart people in various positions. So growth comes through delegating to these experts, and crises comes by either overexerting our control too fast where our franchisees back off, or not exerting enough control and allowing them to do whatever they wish. Stage 4, empire business, line and staff management style, extensive systems. The concept originator is quite distant, may have even taken his payout and walked away. Growth comes through coordination between brands, between departments, and between franchisee and franchisor. And crises will always come when there is too much red tape, too many I's to dot, too many T's to cross. Stage 5, a hybrid organization has a divisional management style, is stable but flexible. The concept originator may have stepped back in, and we've seen this, to get more involved, to sort of bring back the original values of that organization. Growth comes through collaboration, and any kind of crises will oftentimes happen simply because of whatever model they've chosen in stage 5, which is oftentimes a stage 2 or a stage 3 model. So Miss Aubrey, I'm going to open it up to you for any questions that our folks might have.
Okay, so we have, I'm going to try to do some mic opening here. I'm going to see if it'll work. But the first question that came in was from Mr. Olson. He said, most franchisors don't grow beyond 100 units. And why is that kind of like a stopping stage?
So Mr. Steve Olson?
Yeah, let me see if I can pull him up. I don't know if... Steve, are you there? I don't know if it's going to work. Not working. But anyways, so what's your...
Not a problem. We'll answer the question. So Steve, that's actually an excellent question, and as much experience as you've had in your 30 plus years, you've seen this again and again where a franchise system grows and they sort of hover. at that 100 mark. And I think there's basically three primary reasons that happens. One is the concept originator is not willing to step aside and let some smart people in to help him or her grow the organization. So he or she is attempting to do it all. So this could be everything from I love my baby, I want to grow it, to control issues, to pride issues, whatever it is. Or it could even be money issues. But it won't grow past a certain place. We can only manage and handle so much when a single person is sort of running that. A second reason is, as I mentioned, this need to delegate to experts. So unwillingness to let go and an unwillingness to delegate and have clear direction. Maybe not even an unwillingness, but maybe an inability to do so. But in my opinion, the third issue is probably more important. As you can probably see, as management shifts and changes, as we saw in the slides, so too does the culture and leadership style change. So the culture will change from an early stage franchise organization where the concept originator or the leadership is extremely charismatic, and all those first franchisees that come in are enthralled with this great idea and this wonderful leader who acts as a cheerleader. But bottom line, he or she is usually very charismatic. And as we grow to stage 2, frequently the culture and the leadership will shift, where it's more of a, let's call it a paternalistic kind of way of doing it. So there's still an admiration for leadership from the franchisees, but they're now being treated more as children, meaning I want to protect you as a franchisee. I want to make sure you're making money. I want to protect you from any possible boo-boos that could happen to you. So we really give a lot to our children, and frequently in stage 2, our franchisees have this parent-child kind or family, many of you will call it, relationship. So then it sort of hovers. Stage 2 will usually, be 70 to 100 units, and it'll just sort of stay right there. To truly get to stage 3 requires some hard decisions, as you probably know, and the leadership style and the culture will shift and move to more of an autocratic kind of role. And many of us aren't comfortable with that. We live in a democratic world, and to have an autocratic world it oftentimes feels uncomfortable. So I think those are the three primary reasons that we see folks hovering. Never mind, stage 2 still feels homey and nice, right? So we just hover at that 70 to 100 units, and it's profitable. It makes us some money. We're just never going to dominate. Hopefully I answered that question, Aubrey. What's our next question?
Okay, so I'm going to kind of combine a couple of things right here. Jeff Leffler brought up interesting statistics. So he said 65% of all franchise systems in the U.S. have less than 50 outlets at the end of 2014. So that's kind of that stage, late stage 1, early stage 2. And then Evan Hackle was asking, can we give a feeling for how many units are roughly in each stage? So, and something we talk about a lot.
Good question, Evan. So this is rough, right? This is rough. It'll be different. Doing this 22 years, I've seen folks in stage 1 20 years down the road, 30 years down the road. And it's more about the management style and the structure and the leadership and the accountabilities. But rule of thumb, stage 1 is usually 1 to 30 units. Stage 2, 30 to 70 to 100 units. Stage 3, and you'll see this again and again, where a franchise organization, if they can get successfully through stage 2 and move to stage 3, there'll be this explosive growth over the next 24 to 36 months, where they go from 100 units, almost overnight, they'll go to 300. A solid stage 3 at that place at 300. And then they'll hover. Some of them will choose to hover around 300, 400, 500, 600 units. I've seen a stage 3 go up to about 700 units. Then there'll be that decision, right? That decision, are we going to go out, get investor dollars, and we're going to poof, grow, go from 500 to 700 units and get, over that 1,500, 2,000 sort of units. So stage 4, typically, rule of thumb, about a 1,500 unit franchise system. And of course, stage 5, because we're breaking things off, maybe even selling some concepts off, will oftentimes begin a shrinking process and separate concepts working more autonomously. So that can vary in size depending. Okay, I'm sorry, Aubrey, you had another question. Forgive me.
Okay, so there's a lot of questions I'm trying to. Daniel asked, can management teams experience leapfrog stages? In other words, in knowing, now I can't even pull. Daniel, I think it was, how do you help prepare? So the rest of the question isn't coming up.
Okay,
So
I'm getting it. So the question is, how do you help management grow through each stage?
Yeah, recommendations for.
Is that the question?
Yeah. Now, as you know,
we're a psychometric assessment company. We help you measure what stages of growth and allow you to sort of get some insight to what you can predict might be coming up. So we don't actually fix any of those issues. We just warn you about those issues and also warn you to choose the right franchisee that can go through those crises with you, that can go through those growth pains with you. But naturally, there are some basic recommendations. One is know what stage of growth you are in and which crises is in. I mean, it's just going to happen. This is predictable. We see it company after company after company. So if you know it's coming, you can put things in place to mitigate that. If we know there's going to be a crisis of autonomy coming up in 2 and 3, then we want to, from a management perspective, ease our franchisees into this additional accountability and show them the reasons we're doing it and get them vested and actually grateful to be adapting these new systems and processes. So it really is, and your question is an excellent one, what can we do to help managers go through step by step so they can continue to grow, if that's the goal, to continue to grow, because there's no doubt these issues are predictable. There are obviously lots of folks much smarter than me that can help you through those stages, and maybe we can have that be another topic of conversation, another webinar, Aubrey, is how to deal with that.
John has some interesting questions here. One was, sorry, can you guys, I'm coming. The problem is that old franchisees do not have the same system and will not be able to sustain operations unless they update to the new concepts. How do you deal with inevitable validation calls with these old franchisees? So when they've had an old system, regutted it.
You know, I wish we could open this up to some of the brokers that are in and franchise
that are in and franchisors who've gone through these growth, because I'm sure there are some elegant ways to communicate that. But number one, because the question is spot on, in that when we begin to have these retention and validation issues, if we know they're coming up, we can do some things to prevent them. We can buy that franchisee out. We can get him additional support. We'll help him exit in a beautiful way. But let's assume he chooses to stay, and now there's some validation issues and retention issues, and we got someone, you know, making his due diligence calls, which of course we want our prospective franchisees to do. As a broker or as a franchise development guy, I would encourage that you tell the prospective franchisee, we are a stage 2.5 company. Let me tell you what that's about. In stage 2, these following things will happen. So when you're making your calls, Mr. or Mrs. Prospect, you might get hold of folks who were earlier stage franchisees who we gave a lot of autonomy to, that we reached out and they shared their best practices with us, and we were able to then memorialize that and roll those out so the next wave of franchisees do better. But there are some franchisees now that are uncomfortable because we can't give them that same level of autonomy that they had before. Because our job as your franchisor is to guard the brand. It's that equity, it's that brand that will drive business through your door. So that's our job. But trust me, you're going to call a few people who are going to be a little bit uncomfortable with the new systems and processes we've put in place. So keep in mind, this is normal for a stage 2 or stage 3 company to go through. So that way, when they get someone on the phone that's whining a little bit, they've already been pre-framed by you as a franchise development or you as a broker to deal with that and realize, oh, okay, well, this is just a disgruntled franchisee who is an early franchise. Okay, Aubrey.
Okay, and then so kind of along those lines, Kim was asking about how do we discuss, and I'm guessing she says when discussing this with clients, how do you put a positive spin on this and not scare them away? So I'm guessing, Kim, you're just talking about different levels of being a different.
That question.
Yeah,
question,
that's what. And then Evan makes the great suggestion of just bringing in the old franchisees into the process so we don't have to deal with the problems. So,
and I think Evan's point is good, because bring the old franchisees in to sit on those committees, to be on those advisory panels, to be fully participatory. And I agree, Evan, that will prevent some of those issues that are happening, because oftentimes the issues are not financial issues or structure issues, but emotional issues. You don't love me anymore. You don't need me anymore. When you were in stage 1 and stage 2, we had this really tight relationship between us and you, Mr. Franchisor. It was a different relationship, and to all of a sudden put in all these systems and treat them at an arm's length, a more autocratic way, gets painful. It gets painful for that franchisee, and he's saying, wait, I got you where you are. What happened to the loyalty and the bond that we had through stage 1 and stage 2? So I think Evan brings up a really good point. Bring those early franchisees in, set them on those committees, set them on those advisory boards, bring them into your discovery day. Let them be your advocates by letting them know they are still a big part of what you do. Is there any other questions, Aubrey?
A couple really quick ones, and I want to we are recording this, so we're going to be sending this out to you guys later. We're actually going to send an email with a couple of things, so you will have access to this. And then Carrie asked if hovering in stage 2 specifically for 15 to 20 years is a bad thing, or how you.
Good question. Is it difficult?
Is it difficult? So the question was, is it a bad thing to hover at stage 2? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. The late stage 2, 2.6, 2.7, 2.8, in all honesty, is your leanest, meanest operation you're ever going to have. And oftentimes, in terms of what you bring to the bottom line, is going to be your most profitable time. Because remember, in stage 3 and stage 4, we're just adding all kinds of services and adding all kinds of employees, and our expenses begin to go up. So I can't read that, I'm sorry. So yes, there is nothing wrong with staying in stage 2 for as long as you wish to stay. In fact, I have to tell you, there's been numerous times when we have done top performer blueprints on franchisors and we've seen their financials where that's one of the recommendations we give. Whatever you do, don't add too many new services. Hover right here. Don't move into an autocratic. Stay into a partnership, collaborative sort of place. So, bottom line, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. In fact, oftentimes I recommend it. All right, Aubrey, anything else?
So it's our hour's up. If you guys have any more questions and want to kind of hang out and ask them, but we will be sending you guys a, like I said a few minutes ago, a recording of everything with some news about our next webinar that we have coming up. So you guys might be interested in that. It's going to be a survey of the top performing franchisees that Rebecca did some cross-lateral research on. I can't even say that. But we'll have some information for you guys on that as well.
Right. So just the note Aubrey just passed me says pull up a report so people can see. I'm not where I can pull up a report right now, but those of you that are already using our assessment tool, you can tell what stage of growth your prospect is in by looking at the stage of growth portion of your assessment. So that you can see it from there. And most of you that have been in the franchise world, as I went through this presentation, you could sort of slot yourself into one of these categories. But if you have any interest in learning more specifically, of course, feel free to reach out to us, and we're happy to do whatever we can to assist. So I've had fun. How about you, Miss Aubrey?
Always informative. I learn something new every time we do something like this. So again, thank you guys all so much. Check in on the questions. I think we're good. So everybody go enjoy your week. We'll talk to you soon.